Are you struggling to come up with original content week in and week out? Start a podcast. Interview your ideal clients, let them talk about what they care about most, and never run out of content ideas again. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. We're here today with Jamie Millar. He is the founder and president of SkyBridge Associates. He is also an author. Jamie, how are you today?
Very well. I'm glad to be here, Logan.
Awesome. Well, Jamie, it is exciting to have you on this episode today. Thank you for making some time for this interview. Really excited to dive into the topic of executive peer networks and specifically how our audience can approach and understand that topic. Before we do that, I'd love for you to share a little bit of background, set the stage on why you're the guy sharing about this today. Give us a little bit of idea of your background and maybe a little bit about what you and your team are up to these days.
Great. No, I'd be happy to. Well, if anyone's trying to figure out the funny accent, I am from Canada. I grew up in Canada, went to the University of Toronto, have an engineering degree, but never actually worked as an engineer. I actually have an investment banking background, went to Harvard Business School, and then actually stayed on at HBS as the head of admissions, which is sort of an interesting curiosity early in my career. But for about the last 15 years or so, I have been creating, designing, and leading executive peer networks, which I'm sure we'll get into. But it's been a lot of fun, and SkyBridge is growing like crazy, and we're looking forward to telling everyone about it.
Awesome. Well, Jamie, the place that we wanted to start this conversation, I know you mentioned is, a lot of people confuse or maybe use back and forth in the same context without any differentiation is a network and networking. Tell me a little bit about how you distinctly define those two in the context of this conversation of executive peer networks.
Sure. Well, I think the biggest distinction is that networking is a verb, network is a noun, which sounds obvious, but it's actually meaningful. When people talk about networking, it's usually very transactional. Usually people are expecting something. There's sort of a whiff of desperation, quite honestly. Most people hate networking. It just feels inauthentic. I think that's very different from a network. And a network is really a group of people where there's a community, there's a sense of trust, and it's really a group of people that you look forward to getting together with. So the verb networking and the noun network are really quite different. I reject a lot of the premise behind networking. I would never describe our firm as a networking firm. We are very much a firm that creates networks, though.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people have, that negative connotation around the term networking. I mean, I got my start in B2B sales, selling locally, selling office equipment, and never really enjoyed, local chamber events and some of the other things that I, somewhat got value from. But a lot of times there was that feeling of disconnect. I think, that's a common theme for folks when it comes to that, feeling around networking. What are your thoughts on where that kind of shifts in actually building a network that doesn't feel the way that sometimes we negatively associate with networking?
Well, I think a lot of it comes down to, like I said, the sense of community. To me, that's really what people need. And I've spent a lot of time working with people in leadership roles. And, it's a cliche to say that it's lonely at the top, but it really is lonely at the top. And I think what people find as they get more and more senior within any organization is that they have fewer and fewer peers. We like to use this mountain metaphor, and as people climb kind of the corporate ladder, they get higher and higher up the mountain. And what you find as you get to the top of the mountain is that you look out over the valley, and you see something very different than what you saw further down. And you know that on the top of every mountain peak around you, there's another person who's also seeing something quite there's no way to get together with each other. And so I think, to me, that's really where this notion of a network becomes acute. It's when you get to a certain level, you don't have people within your organization who see the landscape the way you do. And so you know that the only way to really build a community and really connect with other people is to find folks on other mountaintops.
Yeah, sometimes there's a big divide there. I think that analogy holds up. The other metaphor you and I were talking about a little bit offline, Jamie, before we started this interview, was the idea of looking at your network as an iceberg. Tell me a little bit more about how you feel about that and unpack that for us a little bit.
Well, I had an interesting conversation once with a member of one of the groups that I lead, and this is someone who he's an attorney, had been an outside lawyer for a client and was then hired to come in-house, which is a pretty common occurrence. And I asked him, what surprised you when you came in-house? And he said, it really struck me how I thought I knew what the company was up to. I thought that I served them all the time. I had a pretty good sense. I really thought I knew. He said, I was shocked at how little I knew about what was actually going on at the company. So I only knew about 10% of what was going on. And so I immediately thought of this iceberg metaphor that you and I had discussed, and the idea that in any client service role, I think any of us who've ever been in client service roles, I've been doing this for years, many people listening probably have as well, that's not an uncommon feeling. You know that there's a lot going on beneath the waterline, but you have no way of seeing it. Right, you're standing on the shore, but you really do need to find a way to get below the waterline and see what's holding the iceberg up.
So you were talking a little bit, Jamie, offline about, ways that people can start to see more of what's going on within their network and ways that they can find other people on these other mountaintops. Not to completely mix metaphors, will blame me for that, but I think, where do folks go from here? There are a lot of folks in our audience that are leading marketing teams, that are leading sales teams in B2B. They've reached that point where they don't necessarily know where to find the other folks that really identify with them, that are seeing the same things from the same vantage point. So I'd love for you to share a few examples of, where people can go to start, building a network that can actually, work for them once they find themselves in this position in their career.
Sure. I think before we get into that question, we should probably talk about what do I mean by a network? Kind of, what does this thing even look like? And so, just from a kind of a definition, we usually think in terms of about 20 people in a network. Basically, large enough that there's a diversity of opinion, diversity of thought, but small enough that everybody can sit around one table, right? So we're not talking about a network of 100 people. In LinkedIn, you've probably got hundreds of connections. That is not a network.
Yes.
So there's a couple of features. So I think one feature is that it's a limited size. The other thing that's an important part of a network is that there's a regular cadence to the interaction, right? That you're not just having a one-off meeting. Again, a lot of these kind of quote-unquote networking events are just one-off events. You meet somebody, you may never see them again. So this idea that you really belong to something, it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It says the need for belonging is way down low after your basic needs have been met. So having a regular cadence to those interactions allows for that sense of community and that trust. And I think also the idea that the members of a group feel some sense of control over the group's agenda, right? Agendas are not just imposed upon them, but rather they get to have some control over it. And that is active discussion. They're not listening passively. We all go to conferences or seminars. You listen to someone kind of drone on, with a PowerPoint deck, which is fine. There's a time and a place for that. But I think a lot of times, particularly as leaders get to more senior roles, they really, want to talk with each other. They want to test ideas. So that's really what we're talking about. It's one of these, small groups. And so I think that to answer your question, B2B marketers ought to be thinking about it two ways. One is, how do I join a network like this myself, right, of people who are dealing with similar issues? They can be from the same industry, they can be from a different industry. A lot of people worry, well, if it's the same industry, won't it be competitive? And not necessarily. I've led lots of groups with people that are from the same industry, and I'll tell you, there's always things to talk about that are non-competitive. So, but at a minimum, it should be people who, are peers, where you have something to learn from them, they have something to learn from you. I think that's a kind of a key principle. So I think anyone listening should probably be a member of one of these. But the other thing to think about is whether you want to sponsor it, because the flip side, getting back to our iceberg metaphor, is that there's an awful lot of learning to be had if you sponsor a network. And what that basically means is, pay for the network to exist. It's a marketing tactic like any other. The beauty of it is that you get to be basically a fly in the wall as your biggest customers are talking to each other, right?
Yeah.
So you imagine 20 of your biggest customers in a room talking to each other about their most important issues, not just issues that are related to your product or service, but issues that are related to their life, right? To the industry, to external trends, internal practices, and by the way, their own careers, right?
Yeah.
And so just being a fly in the wall, listening and learning and interacting with your clients in sort of a non-transactional way. So those are the two. I think everybody ought to at least consider one or both of those.
I love the thought there in the second one is, as soon as you kind of play that scenario out, I think a lot of people can really visualize it. When you say, sponsor, this sort of network or these sorts of events, it sounds kind of stale. But then once you picture, 20 of your top clients sitting around talking about the things that they care about, it's like, a software company organizing user groups and being able to, see what people are talking about. That feedback is invaluable, right?
It absolutely is. And I think the only difference is I know a lot of user groups will focus on, how do you use my software, right?
Yep.
So which
It's
makes
still
sense.
kind
You
of
want to talk
product
about
centric,
that.
right? Yeah.
Right. So the agenda is still the sponsor's agenda. I think the difference in what I'm describing is that actually you remove the sponsor's agenda altogether, right? What you basically say is, you, Mr. or Ms. Client, you are my primary focus. I want to hear what your agenda is. I'm not going to impose my agenda on you. And so I think that then you really take the shackles off. That's how you get below the waterline. I think if you're focused only on your own service, then you're focused on the part above the waterline. It's as soon as you allow the members to set the agenda that you put your scuba gear on and you get to see below the waterline.
I love how we're coming back to that analogy. I think that is phenomenal advice.
All right, today's growth story is about search engine marketing. Clear Company is an HR tech company that was doing a lot of things right. Their messaging was clear, their product produced incredible results, but they were struggling to drive qualified traffic to their website. Then they found Directive Consulting, a B2B search marketing agency. Within the first 12 months of working with Directive, Clear Company was able to increase their qualified lead volume by 157%. I have a hunch that Directive can get these kind of results for you too. So head over to directiveconsulting.com and request a totally free custom proposal. That's directiveconsulting.com. All right, let's get back to this interview.
Tell us a little bit about how you typically see this play out. As we were talking about this offline, Jamie, you mentioned, it's a longer term play. You're not talking about, a decade's worth of investment, whether you're, talking about being in the member side or the donor side of an executive peer network. But tell us a little bit about where people get started, what this kind of looks like over, this continuous cadence. As you mentioned, it's something that you don't want to do as a one-off thing. That's not really the way this strategy plays out. Tell us a little bit about kind of what that looks like over time.
Sure. So you're right. It is interestingly, it is something that often will last for 10 years. It's not uncommon for these things to last for 5, 10, 15 years. I think in terms of the value, you're right. The value is does reveal itself over time, and I think what we find is that there are a number of ways people get value from these. Part of the reason people continue to invest year after year. We work with a lot of very sophisticated sponsors, so they wouldn't continue to invest if they weren't getting value. But I think that certainly you always acquire new clients, particularly because you normally have a mix of clients and prospects. It's actually a great way sometimes to convert a prospect. Is if you have the group in place, you invite a prospect to be part of the group. It's a great way of giving them something of value before they sign on. It's also a great way to retain existing clients. One of the things somebody pointed out to me once is that having multiple touch points every year is a great way to keep in touch with clients. You don't have to wait for them to call you. You don't have to wait for a problem to become so significant that it gets escalated. You just sort of have this very informal touch point several times a year. So you really do find yourself avoiding defections. And you also, I think, this was struck home to me by one of our sponsors as well, as in some ways probably the main point of value is even if you have clients in the group, there's always pricing pressure. And somebody made the point, if you have a relationship with a client that goes beyond just a transactional relationship, you're going to have much better margin. You're not going to get squeezed on margin the way you would if it was just, if you're just seen as a vendor. If you're seen as someone that they like and know and trust and, hang out with several times a year, they're going to be much, much less aggressive in pricing. And also they're going to be more likely to give you the benefit of the doubt when problems arise, because they always do. They're going to know what's in your heart.
Yeah.
So, and I think the last thing I would point out is, it's a great way to listen to the market. I'm reminded of this notion. I don't know if you've talked about it in prior podcasts about, that businesses are built around jobs to be done. And I think it's the classic example is that nobody buys a 1/4-inch drill bit. What people want to buy is a 1/4-inch hole.
Right.
And so I think that in that spirit, when you're listening to your clients talking about problems that they have or, things they wish were different, it allows you to say, you know what, we don't do this, but we could. Right. And so it allows you to actually not just fight over market share, but literally create in sort of a proprietary way market that wouldn't exist. And by the way, the beauty of that is that it's not limited to just the members of the group, right? So you may have only 20 of your clients in the group, but those insights you could take to all of your clients and create new offerings. So it's, there's a lot of ways that people get a ton of value out of these.
Yeah. Well, and I think that is phenomenal. We had, Mark Smith, who's the VP of sales at Wampley, on the show a few weeks back. He was talking about the importance of B2B salespeople understanding a day in the life of their customer, that other, 80 to 90% below the waterline in your analogy here, Jamie. And, this allows you to do that more at scale, as a company and as a team. And the other value point that I'm thinking about here is now, not only are you deepening the relationships as you're the fly on the wall at these events, but now you're delivering value before outside of your transactional relationship of, you pay me money, I provide you this service. You're providing the opportunity for your clients to rub shoulders with, to learn from, to build a network that's valuable to them. And that's coming out of your efforts. So they continue to associate you with that value. And like you said, when it comes to renewal time, looking at price, looking at all these other things, those other points of value can tip the scale in your favor. In addition to building a relationship, there's actual tangible value that you're bringing there on an ongoing basis, right?
No question. Look, I think there's a very powerful unspoken message that sponsoring one of these groups, tells your clients. It says, we care about you. We want you to succeed. We want to listen. We're not just pitching. And as you said, we're offering you something of value. We're really not. There is no quid pro quo. We're not asking you for anything in return. And it's a great way to build trust, to generate goodwill. It's sort of in the spirit. My wife is a writer. They talk about show, don't tell. It really is a way of showing your clients that you care.
Right.
That's much more powerful than just telling them you care.
Yeah. Jamie, I could talk about this subject all day long. I really appreciate you sharing your specific insights into ways that people can add value, can listen to the market, all these other values that come out of, an executive peer network. If anybody listening to this would like to reach out to you, stay connected, follow up with you in any way, what's the best way for them to go about doing that?
So the best thing is to go check out our website, www.skybridge.associates. There's a contact link there, both an email and a phone number. If they want, they can also pick up the book. It's available in hardcover, paperback, ebook, and audiobook. So if you haven't had enough of my voice, you can listen to me reading the book as well. Those are available through all your usual online platforms, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, etc.
Very nice. We'll make sure we link to it in the show notes. And you did your own audiobook, it sounds like.
I did. Yep.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, we're big fans of podcasting, big fans of audiobooks, because for me, it's just, a great way to be able to digest more value in a shorter amount of time. So I appreciate you sharing that. We'll link to the book in the show notes. Jamie, thanks for coming on and sharing your expertise. Really enjoyed the conversation.
I did too. Thanks, Logan. I appreciate it. It's been great to have this conversation.
Becoming a thought leader doesn't just happen. If you want to build a strong personal brand and extend your reach online and offline, you need a plan. Want help developing yours? Check out Impact Summit. This one-day event is bringing together best-selling authors, professional athletes, influential CEOs, and emerging entrepreneurs, all for one purpose: to equip you to lead, influence, and inspire. Whether you're looking to build a lasting legacy with your business or extend the reach of your brand, Impact Summit speakers will share inspiring stories and practical lessons to help you on your way. Did we mention a session on launching and growing a podcast? You guessed it, you'll hear from Sweetfish Media's own James Carberry during that session. You won't want to miss all of these influencers and leaders coming together in Salt Lake City on October 13th. Ready to learn more? Check out influencerinc.co/Impact Summit. B2B Growth listeners can get 15% off the price of their tickets for this event by using the promo code SWEETFISH, SWEETFISH. So use that code, get your tickets today, and get ready to grow your brand and your influence at Impact Summit 2018.